Welcome in, everybody, to the CFB Nation All-America podcast presented by Twisted Tea. I'm Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, alongside Bill Bender, our national college football writer at sportingnews.com. You can follow Bill on Twitter at BillBender92, and you can follow me at Bill Trocchi, and keep an eye on the main Sporting News account at Sporting News. And if you enjoy this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and submit a brief review. That would be very helpful to us. It's a half hour of free entertainment. That's worth 1 or 2 minutes of writing a review, right, Bill?
5 stars. Put a 5 on that. You can do it. Yeah, thanks to all our listeners. I mean, we're at we're close to mid-season. We're going to have to look at mid-season All-Americans pretty soon.
It's amazing to think, with just how the calendar fell, that we had 5 full weeks in September, 5 full Saturdays, plus the week 0 and everything, like we talked about. A team like Notre Dame already has 6 games of their 6 of their 12 were played in August or September, which is sort of crazy. It should be a fun week again. Got some big ones, some games that are going to affect the college football playoff picture for sure. Last week we talked about it. There were 10 top 25 teams that were road favorites, and they're all playing like either conference teams or definitely Power 5 teams, whatever. There were 10 top 25 teams. I expected a lot of chaos. Didn't know where it was going to come from. What happened to those 10 teams? They went 9-1. There was very little upset. The only upset was LSU losing at Ole Miss of the whole 10. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, and they couldn't tackle, but we can get into that in a little bit. I mean, it's like you said, you wrote an excellent column at Sporting News yesterday, detailing why Georgia shouldn't be number 1. And I think that's become a little bit of a story of the season now, is that these 11 teams or so, many of whom were on that list, won last week. And it's I heard this analogy from Peter Burns a couple years ago. He was on the radio, and I always steal it from him. And Peter's a good dude. He referred to like college football as this like demolition derby, and it's which car gets knocked off the track first. LSU and is the first one, and Notre Dame was pretty close, and Alabama's flirting with it. They kind of get off the rails, and then, who knows? And then Matt Hayes wrote an excellent column this week about A&M. So I've read a lot of good stuff. A&M looks pretty good. So we'll get into that in our picks this week. But that's the SEC. And by the way, Kirby said they should all be ranked. Kirby's wrong. We can call Kirby out on that. He said every SEC team should be ranked. Well, that's maybe he read your column and didn't like it, so that was his comeback.
I don't know. I would say Duke over Clemson was the only whoa, what's going on? And now that the season has played out, it wasn't as much of an upset looking back. No. But that Monday night on Labor Day, that caught people off guard. But we haven't had too many of those, really. Okay, so I want to ask you one more thing before we get into the viewer's guide, before we get into the confidence contest, which I don't want to get into. Before we get into Trocchi Trivia and everything. So I want to ask you, we got 4 kind of surprise undefeated teams. I mean, more than that, but who are facing a big test this week. Who would you say has the best chance of remaining undefeated of these 4 kind of surprise undefeated teams? Kentucky at Georgia, Missouri playing at home against LSU, Maryland goes to Ohio State, Louisville at home against Notre Dame. 4 undefeated teams facing really their first true test of the season.
Well, I didn't pick any of those teams to win this week. I would say Missouri has the best chance to win because I don't know what kind of – they beat LSU a few years ago in a wild game that was very similar to Ole Miss. I was texting back and forth with one of the dads here in Pickerington. His son is a soon-to-be 4-star quarterback, and he was talking about Cook from Missouri. He watches these quarterbacks with his son. He's like, I really like Cook's game, and I said, yeah, he's efficient, 70%, and it doesn't hurt when you're throwing to Luther Burden. So I think of those 4, and we'll get into some reasons why with the other 3 that as we get into the viewer's guide, but I'd probably pick Mizzou, which would make a lot of the people we work with at Sporting News happy. Except for Matt, because Matt Latovsky, our fantasy editor, is a huge Mizzou guy, but he's also very much fell off the cynical tree, just like me. I think we're curmudgeons back and forth. So he probably thinks they're going to lose by 20.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see. Even if one of them pulls it off, it'll be cool that they're continuing their kind of magical start or whatever. But all four have big challenges for sure. So, all right, let's bring in some Trocchi trivia to get started. It's a real quick question. Who are the top 2 rated passers in the ACC? That's my trivia question. Who are the top 2 rated passers in the ACC? Maybe a trick question.
It is, because I know it's not Drake, but we can get into all right.
So, think about that one. We'll revisit that at the end of the show. And now let's get into our viewer's guide. Okay, we're going to go into the noon window. We start off right again. So many big games have been at noon this year, and it's been kind of fun to kick the day off like that. I've always said that the ratings is matchup dependent. It's not really time slot dependent. People will find the game, but just it so happens that a lot of the big games have been at noon this year. The biggest game this weekend is at noon, of course. Number 12 Oklahoma versus number 3 Texas in Dallas. ABC has this one. Texas is a 5.5-point favorite. The first time since 2011 that both teams have been unbeaten. This seems like a different OU team for sure. Can you see? Here's a question for you before we get into like all the other details. Can Texas jump to number 1 with a win?
No, maybe. I mean, that's thought is out there. And Jacob Hester and I were talking about that on his show yesterday, that, if they win, you could make the case that they've had the best 6 or 7 weeks to start the season. And they are favored, and they won this game large last year. And there's going to be a lot of emotion. We had a lot of fun talking to Chris Hummer about this game. So, I mean, there'll be a case for that for sure. And then the Texas is back material will be off the charts because they will have survived a 3-week stretch where we talked about Baylor, Kansas, Oklahoma. So you're looking at 6-0 and heading into the back half of the season with a mulligan in their back pocket because you're allowed to lose one. And that puts them square in the playoff race. And so, they would definitely be close. I guess the converse of that is if Oklahoma wins, how high do we move them? I mean, I just think they're too much of an undercard in this game. Like, they're good, and they're going to play with an edge, but I don't remember a Red River rivalry or showdown. I don't know which one we have to call it. Rivalry now, where it was Texas is going to win by a ton. It's been a while since we've had one of those. Even last year was not expected. This year, it's almost expected, which is weird.
So some of the research I was doing for this game is how much Oklahoma tries to run the ball. And, because Texas D-line is getting some props out there, and they're 18th in the nation in rushing defense. Oklahoma likes to run it. They average 39 runs a game and 34 passes a game. So they're trying to run first a little bit, but they're 93rd in yards per carry. So they are not running it effectively thus far, and it's going to be even tougher against Texas's D-line. So a lot of this game is going to fall on the shoulders of Dillon Gabriel.
Yeah, and he's super efficient, and he's a good player. And, this game has swings. I mean, you look at that, what was that stat I had in our picks this week? It was something to the effect of, a lot of these games are 1-score games, but none of them are 3 points or less. It typically falls in that 5 to 7 point range, 8 of the last 10 meetings. So it's who handles the swings, because this game is totally, you turn it in the first quarter, it's 21-0, and then it's 28-21 the other way by the third quarter. And, the Caleb Williams game a few years ago was evidence of that. You've got to be able to handle the momentum swings in this game, and we'll see how they both do it. It's always wildly entertaining. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that Caleb Williams game was one of my favorites of that whole season. It was just see him come off the bench and kind of introduce himself to the country. Yeah, it was really fun. This is going to be fun. Like you said, Oklahoma, we don't know what to make of him. I think you have been on the Oklahoma bandwagon earlier than a lot of the national people, and we'll see if they show up. And, there's no shame in losing. to Texas. If you put a good showing, they still deserve to be in the conversation for, top 15 team and all that kind of stuff. Alabama obviously lost to Texas by 10. No one's writing Alabama off yet. So
we'll pretend Barry Switzer didn't hear you say there's no shame in losing to Texas. So I'm gonna have, if I speak to him in the near future, I'll tell him somebody said that. See what Barry says. So no, but you're right. It's 15. They'll be top 15 either way, unless it's like one of those 48, 49 nothing type blowouts.
All right, so another noon game. The big noon game on Fox is going to be Maryland at number 4, Ohio State. Ohio State is a 19.5-point favorite. Maryland is number 26 in both polls, first team out. They have beaten 3 Power 5 opponents by 25 points per game. And Taulia leads the Big Ten in passing yards per game. He's second in rating behind J.J. McCarthy. Maryland's pretty good. How do you see this game? Because Ohio State's been off since the Notre Dame game. They've been getting pats on the back for pulling that one out. They feel like they're right in the playoff picture, right where they should be. That was a big hurdle. It was a lot of, release after that game, some emotion from Ryan Day, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Are they going to be focused on Maryland? They have last year was a 2-score game, but they've blown them out several times over the last 10 years.
It's a tricky one to pick because I know this Maryland team is better. And they've had 4 trips to the shoe, and they've lost by an average of 47 points per game.
Wow.
So these have been slaughters when they've gone to Ohio State. That said, and I remember talking to Taulia about this, not this year, but the year before at Big Ten Media Day, where, he thinks about these games a lot. He doesn't think about the 4-touchdown game against Michigan State. He thinks about the Michigan game and the Ohio State game and the Penn State game. Penn State beat them 30-0 last year, but they lost to Ohio State and Michigan by an average of 10 points. So I think they're going to play with some confidence in this game. It's just a matter of with the Terps, and we have them in our top 25, by the way, for 2 weeks, because I think they're a top 25 team and they've recruited well. And Taulia is a veteran quarterback that's played a lot of football, but it really comes down to can you come out and beat one of these teams? They are going to be a team in the Big Ten next year that benefits from not playing those 3 schools every year. I think they're going to be like right in the middle, top 6 team in the Big Ten because of that, maybe. And Mike Loxley's doing a good job recruiting there and building that program. But this is a moment where, like you said, if Ohio State comes out focused, the Buckeyes will win. The line looks tricky. I think Maryland will hang around enough to cover, but it still feels like a double-digit Buckeyes win.
Yeah, we've seen it across college football that these teams with the veteran quarterbacks versus the young quarterbacks, the rookie quarterbacks, that there's a difference, right? Like Cam Ward, for example. We'll talk about him later. A guy in his second year is just performing at a higher level. You look at a guy like Dante Moore, actually same game. We'll talk about that soon. The freshman quarterback, his, first game at Utah did not go well. His first, true challenge. And so Maryland has the advantage at quarterback in terms of experience in this game.
Yeah, and McCord building off that confidence. I think Ohio State would do themselves a great favor by putting Notre Dame on the back burner because it's Big Ten season now, and the Ryan Day thing that ran its course. I think it opened himself up to probably more criticism as the season goes on because if they lose to Penn State or Michigan or even this one, if they lose to this one somehow, I could see Ohio State fans blaming Notre Dame somehow, blaming this whole feud with Lou Holtz. So,
Lou Holtz, just keep blaming him for the next 5 years.
It'll be his fault if they lose to Michigan, that kind of thing. So, no, it'll be an interesting game though.
All right, our third game in the noon window is going to be number 23 LSU at number 21 Missouri. That's an ESPN game. LSU is a 6.5-point favorite. We already talked about it. Missouri is undefeated. LSU is coming off a 55-49 loss to Ole Miss, tackling optional in that game. Brian Kelly, I watched his press conference from Monday, and a good chunk of it was spent on the secondary and what they can do to get better. Ross Dellinger, I was listening to their podcast he works for Yahoo now, said, in his summer visit to LSU, he pulled some of the coaches aside and said, all right, what's your concern? And they all said the secondary. And that has proven to be true. Who's Missouri's best player? Wide receiver Luther Burden III. So we got to tell our friend Matt that that's an advantage Missouri can look forward to. Brady Cook, second in passer rating in the SEC, but number one is Jaden Daniels. He'll be on the other side of the field. So should be an interesting one.
Shoot out the top two receivers in the country, Luther Burden and Malik Neighbors, top two in receiving yards, both 5 touchdowns. LSU had 17 missed tackles last week. That can't happen again. I picked LSU in our picks against the spread earlier this week, and I'm like second guessing it because 6.5, I'm like, that game, the more you look at it, it's like that feels like 38-34. Big spot for Mizzou, as we mentioned at the top, with these unexpected undefeateds and for Eli, and we'll see if they can get it done. And for LSU and Brian Kelly, it'll be a matter of focus. Now, sometimes when a team loses 2 and we worry, are they in it? They just take it out on the next team. And that could totally happen here. LSU could go up there because of the talent advantage that they have and just put a smackdown on Mizzou, and I wouldn't be surprised either. But they just got to tackle somebody.
Yeah, I said it last week about LSU. You don't know. I mean, their game against Mississippi State, that's not the same competition, but they looked like a machine. Right. And they've been a Jekyll and Hyde team for sure. One last note on this game, according to the Sagarin ratings, Missouri's strength of schedule sits at 88 and LSU is 3. So clearly, obviously, LSU has had, the tougher road. Then 2 losses back that up. And that is probably why they are a touchdown favorite on the road. All right, we'll move on to our afternoon window. Start at 3:00 Eastern time on the Pac-12 network. It's going to be number 13, Washington State at UCLA. UCLA is a 3.5-point favorite. And the question is, why is that?
I don't know. Washington State's been a good super dog. I think
that's the trap line of the week.
It is.
We have a trap every week. That is a trap.
Well, the Cougs have covered twice as an underdog. Last time these guys played in 19, it was 67-63. The last 5 games have been 1-score games.
That was the wild comeback, right? Like They came back from like 30 down or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a game that, the late Mike Leach would appreciate. I think they're going to get up and down and score a bunch of points. And this Washington State team's a lot of fun. And for UCLA coming off the loss, I mean, granted, it was at Utah. Both of these teams had a bye week. And so there could be a little bit of rustiness early, but I think it'll be a fun game. 2 fun quarterbacks, another Pac-12. Again, wrong window because it's up against Alabama and A&M, but, make sure you have a TV on that one. It'll be a good game.
Well, yeah, and it's on the Pac-12 network. The Pac-12 network, they got Colorado later. We'll talk about that, and they got this game too. 2 good games, but they won't get the exposure. Cam Ward, great story. I think we jumped the gun on him. We featured him last year, but he has really matured in his second season. He has 13 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he's really emerged. He's 3rd in the Pac-12 in passer rating behind Caleb Williams and Michael Penix, which is 2 guys that probably they're 1-2 in the Heisman race at this point, right? So no shame in being number 3 in that league right there. So yeah, I mean, we're rooting for him. I know you did a lot of research and talked to people about him last year, and he's really living up to the rep this year, and it's good to see. Right. So yeah, we'll see in our picks later, but that's a line I can't figure out.
Right.
So over at 3:30 CBS. Like you mentioned, number 11, Alabama at Texas A&M. Texas A&M unranked. Alabama's only a 2.5-point favorite. Game's been very close the last 2 years. Dramatic finishes, both won by the home team. Now they're back in Aggie land. No real Saban Jimbo talk this week. It's more who's going to take control of the SEC West, right?
Yeah, and I mentioned Matt's column, and that spooked me a little bit because Matt's always on to, like, when it comes to SEC matters, he's on to, when he says Texas A&M could do this, Matt wouldn't write that Texas A&M's good, and they've turned the corner and all these kind of things with Max Johnson, unless he really means it. So, I mean, they absolutely have a chance to win this game. But I saw an Alabama team that, Nick's on the sideline dropping F-bombs. He's getting fired up about every call. I think Saban knows what he has now and knows with Jalen Milroe what they can be and how efficient he was last week. They didn't turn the ball over. He turned the ball over a lot when they played A&M last year. They ran into a trouble spot at A&M the last time they played because Calzada got hot. I think Alabama is a little bit better on defense, and they're going to rely on that defense. And at his core, Saban likes that. So, yeah, it's another tricky line. It's moved around a little bit. It's actually moved down. So there is a little bit of value with the Crimson Tide if you want to go that way.
Yeah, and it's funny that I think you mentioned it yesterday. Max Johnson has faced Alabama as a starting quarterback. And, of course, Jalen Monroe, who's fairly inexperienced, has faced Texas A&M as a starting quarterback. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. This game has been fun, like we said, throughout the year. Who has the better quarterback?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Max has played a lot more football. He's more experienced. It's kind of that Talia, and, we talked about all these transfer quarterbacks that have played a lot of football. I think Jalen Milroe is a little more talented because he's raw. He's not the most accurate quarterback. But with what Nick Saban did with him last week, I think was better. I mean, they went down to Mississippi State. They took care of business. I think it's going to be a fun game. I think this could be a really defensive game, like 24-21 type game. And but to answer your question, if I had to pick one, I mean, Max Johnson has played a lot of football and is experienced. And if it gets down to the fourth quarter and you need one drive, he's probably your guy, right? And that's going to be the pressure point in this game.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about. I think it felt like Alabama was approaching the A&M game last year. A&M wasn't very good last year, too. It was just, let's get through this game. We don't have Bryce Young. Let's let Jalen, hopefully he doesn't make any mistakes so we can just kind of move on. And Jalen did make some mistakes, and Texas A&M almost pulled the big upset, even though they were struggling. And they did not have a great year last year, but they did almost beat Alabama. So that'll be a good one, 3:30 CBS. Our third one to keep an eye on mid-afternoon, Syracuse at number 14, North Carolina, 3:30 on ESPN. UNC is an 8.5-point favorite. Syracuse is 4-1. Their lone loss was at home last week to Clemson. They didn't really show up for that game. I was a little surprised. I picked Syracuse. That didn't happen. That was a common theme last week. North Carolina, what do you think? They're very quietly undefeated. They have a first-round NFL quarterback. They're undefeated. They beat South Carolina on opening night, but since then, I feel like they've kind of just fallen off the radar, and they're just kind of quietly winning all their games.
Yeah, they've got a tough, better defense, not like an elite defense, but their linebackers are good. Cedric Gray, Kymon Rucker, Power Eccles. I mean, that's an underappreciated group of linebackers that's working with Gene Chizik. They've played better defense. Drake May has been good, but not great by his standards, throwing a couple picks, and they have a good running game. They have a good support system around Drake May, though. So while the numbers might not be there, this is a better team. It's probably the best team I think North Carolina's had under Mac, and they've gone to an ACC championship game. So that's saying something. And with all these ACC contenders, they're flying under the radar a little bit. So I think they take care of business at home here. By the way, pretty good against single-digit spreads, too. So I like Tar Heels.
Yeah, it's like Duke has gotten a lot of attention, rightfully so. Miami's gotten a lot of attention with that big win over A&M. They're undefeated. Florida State obviously has gotten a lot of attention. And then old North Carolina with Drake May is also undefeated. And we'll see if they start to get a little more attention. This is a chance to, beat a solid team against Syracuse. They're unranked, but a chance for Drake May to show out a little bit. So now moving on to the evening window, 6:30 on the Pac-12 network. Colorado at Arizona State. Colorado is a 4.5-point favorite. Travis Hunter out 2 more weeks. So he's going to miss this one. He's going to miss Stanford. Then they have a bye week. Deion Sanders said yesterday that he's hoping he'll be back for the UCLA game after the bye. Colorado finally out of the spotlight a little bit. What do you think?
That'll be good for them because I think this is where the real work begins. Arizona State, first-year coach Kenny Dillingham, kind of the other end of the spectrum. 5 different quarterbacks have played for him or 4 different quarterbacks that have 5 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Colorado's played one guy, Shedeur Sanders, 15 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and that helps. It helps having a quarterback when you're making a transition as a first-year coach. So, yeah, I think that's one of the big differences there. And Arizona State not playing for a bowl game this year. This could be one of their bowl games. This could be one where Colorado better be ready to play because that's the target you paint because of all that attention. I still think Deion's going to get them to a bowl game when you look at the back half of this schedule. Mm-hmm. But, yeah, the ratings will be less, obviously. And out of sight, out of mind, in some ways can be good for Colorado over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, that's very true. Arizona State, I read they may redshirt Jaden Rashada. He's supposed to be out about a month, but that would be interesting to limit him to 4 games, preserve his red shirt. They're not going to a bowl game this year. So, I mean, he can still almost play all the games he's healthy and stay at 4. You know what I mean? Because, right. Like I said, he's going to be missed out a month, and then they're only going to have 12. So, and then preserve the red shirt for, who knows? Like we said, these veteran quarterbacks, they're really emerging. Trenton Bourguet will get his second start for Arizona State. He did throw for 344 yards last week when they lost to Cal, but, wasn't enough. They have a 4-game losing streak heading in. Spread might be a little low. It's hard to read, though, Colorado's, emotional state after being on the big stage week after week after week. And so we'll see what happens there. All right, another game we mentioned, number 20, Kentucky at number 1, Georgia, 7 o'clock ESPN. Georgia, 14.5-point favorite. Keep in mind, Georgia, one of 4 teams, according to TeamRankings.com, not to cover the spread this season. Though they got a push last week at Auburn, a late push with a touchdown with 3 minutes to go to win 27-20. They were a 7-point favorite. So we've talked a little Kentucky. We've talked Georgia. Do you think the, 2 touchdown plus a hook line is accurate?
It's tough. I went back and forth on it all week because this week could be a week early on. This is the game where Georgia reminds everybody. And on the flip side, I think this is a really good Kentucky football team with Ray Davis that has played within themselves. And even when they played Georgia a couple years ago, not last year. Last year's game was pretty close. The year before when they went to Georgia, and that was Georgia's just ridiculous defense. They moved the ball on them, and they were efficient. They just didn't have enough talent. And I've seen this movie with these two before, and I think this is Kentucky's best team. So it should be a fun game. They've lost the last 5 at Georgia by an average of 27 points. So, I mean, the risk is there, but I think it's going to be a big weekend for the Bluegrass State, and this is a good showcase game for Mark Stoops.
Yeah, speaking of, nice transition. Number 10, Notre Dame at number 25, Louisville, 7:30 on ABC. Notre Dame is a 6.5-point favorite. Louisville and Kentucky, never been 5-0 at the same time, according to Pat Forty. This is the third of 4 straight primetime games against undefeated teams for Notre Dame. Lost the first one, won the second one, both close. This one could be close too. It's going to be a hostile environment. And this spread, it's 1 point different from the Duke game. It's just 1 point higher. Duke was a 5.5-point spread. This is a 6.5-point spread. Is this going to be another 4-quarter battle for the Irish?
Maybe. Louisville's good, and Braum is amazing, the work that he's done there. And I think I know the trivia question as a result because I can see where you went with that. But, it comes down to Plummer and turnovers. And if they can do that, I went down to this game a couple years ago when they played at Louisville. Notre Dame did, and it was great atmosphere.
Notre Dame struggled in that game, if I recall.
First half they did because Louisville ran the ball effectively, and that'll be the key in this one. Now on the other side, Audric Estime, Josh Pate had a fantastic stat. Not only does he lead the nation in rushing, he has 10 rushes of 20 yards or more. I mean, that's best running back in the country material. And, that's the guy that scored the touchdown last week. And he's a big physical running back.
2
He's
touchdowns,
not,
actually.
what's that?
He had 2 touchdowns, actually.
Oh, I mean, well, there you go. But he had the big touchdown though, the one
Yeah,
that wins.
yeah.
He reminds me, he's not quite as big, but he looks like Bettis when he gets his pads turned. And, obviously not nearly as big as the bus. Maybe he is, but that kind of physical running will matter on the road. And again, it's just about how they handle the emotions of a third straight road game or a third straight primetime game with the big one coming next week against USC.
Right, and those 2 were just heart-stopping, emotionally draining games, both of
Right.
them. Came down to one play on both of them. They made one, they didn't make one, and, yeah, so it will be a challenge, and again, this goes to coaching and getting your team in the right mindset, and we're still not sure where Freeman is in his second year. People believe in him, people love him, but he's still learning on the job, as we're seeing, and, but they pulled that one out last week against Duke. So, all right, let's get into our confidence contest real quick, and then we can get to the trivia answer. Our confidence contest. I still lead 34-30.5. You won 5-0 last week. Like, what was it? 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I missed them all, and you gave me a little pep talk. You said, you know what? Yeah. Sometimes it happens, whatever. And then the next week, I went undefeated. And then last week, winless again. So I'm sort of like LSU. I'm up and down. I'm a Jekyll and Hyde too. You got to give me another pep talk this week?
The picks at Sporting News, I'm still, each week I do those for us, and I'm hovering right around 500. I think I'm 1 game under, 2 games under, I think. And I go about 500 every week. So it's just, you ride these like waves of, I was 3-0 after the early games, and then I'm 3-6. So it's every window. It ought to be fun this weekend. I think we have some good picks.
All right. So just as a reminder, it's a confidence contest. We go 5 games against the spread, and the most confident, you assign 5 points, 4 points for the second most, down to 1. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bill, you can kick us off with your 5-pointer for this week.
I'll go Notre Dame 7, or is it 6.5?
6.5.
I'll take the 6.5 then. I think they win by a touchdown. I mean, that kind of follows ACC script when they play ACC. They still covered last week despite the struggles. I think that as emotional as that is, and that's is a road fave. I don't think Louisville's quite there yet. I do like Braum. I think they'll run some trick plays. It'll be very similar to that game. But the last time they played down there, they won by 18 because of the running game and because of the efficient quarterback play. I'll take the Irish for 5.
Yeah, I was scared of that game. I don't know where their head will be. They almost, like I said, they came within a 4th and 16 of losing, and then they certainly wouldn't have been within 6.5 point favorites had they lost that game. It came down to 1 point. So, I mean, 1 play. So I stayed away from that game. My 5-pointer is the trap game that we talked about. I'm taking Wazoo plus the 3.5. At UCLA. I just Washington State's better, and they have 2 big quality wins this year. The resumes don't compare at all. They were both home wins for Wazoo, but I don't think the Rose Bowl is an intimidating environment. UCLA kind of failed their only test at Utah. We're seeing Utah, a great D, but they can't do anything on offense. They didn't do anything on offense in UCLA. UCLA still couldn't beat them. Dante Moore kind of looked like a freshman in that game. So I'm going Washington State, and I'm going to gladly take the 3.5. I'd probably give the 3.5 if I had to.
Yeah, that's all to be continued on that. 4, I have Alabama minus 2.5. I think Texas A&M can beat them, and it's this whole we prematurely buried Alabama thing, and I think Nick Saban's running with that. I think they'll find a way to go to the road, win a tight one. I was impressed with how they handled the road environment last week. I think that defense is nasty. Max Johnson has played better, and he is a veteran, but there are some limitations to that. And I think Alabama's figuring some things out on the offensive end. So I'll take the Crimson Tide. Going to be tight. And because it went down a whole point, because I could see them winning by a field goal, I'm going to go ahead and go with Alabama.
Yeah, BetMGM's got a 2.5 right now.
Nope. I'm going to steal that one.
There you go. All right. My 4-point Texas minus 6.5 against Oklahoma. I just think they won 49-0 last year, and Oklahoma is certainly better, but I think Texas is better this year too, better than they were last year. They're better on the lines, and I don't think OU is going to be able to run the ball, so it's all on Gabriel. Maybe he's up to the task, maybe he isn't. Too much firepower. I just, one touchdown I don't think is too much to ask for this Texas team, especially when they went down to Alabama, won by 10. So I'm taking Texas minus 6.5 for my 4-point.
Yep. I mean, that's a good pick, and to be continued on that. I got Western Kentucky minus 6.5 over Louisiana Tech. It's a little, I rarely go off the board, but I still like that Western Kentucky team. I think they're the best team in that conference. They got on track after the Ohio State win. Their offense is fun, and when they win big. So I'm going to go with the Hilltoppers as a kind of off the board. I rarely stray off the top 25, but that's one I'll take.
Way off the board, baby.
I like it.
I like it too. All right, so I'm going to echo you with the 3-point. I'm taking Alabama minus 2.5. Basically, all they have to do is win the game, and a lot of people have made a lot of money betting on Nick Saban over the last 15 years, I think. So, I thought that, the Aggies got him 2 years ago down there. That's a one-off. I can't imagine them getting him 2 out of 3 years. Of course, they almost got him last year too. But I feel like you're right when you said he knows what he's got now, and they know how to attack with Moreau at quarterback. They understand his limitations and how to work around them. And the defense has been playing very well. So, let's not forget A&M got kind of blown out by Miami earlier this year. I've kind of put that one aside. So I just think Alabama, they're in a better spot. They looked terrible against USF, but again, that wasn't a Milroe game. They've kind of figured out how to work it with Milroe. And so I think they can win this one.
I mean, so that takes us down to what, 2? I got Washington State. All the reasons you said. I mean, plus 3.5. They've been good. I've gotten most of their games right this year. So, spread wise, I feel like I have a decent read on them. I think they're the better team. I think they have a better quarterback and the more experienced quarterback, and they go down there and win. I'd like them to win outright. So, I mean, that's an upset pick worth taking this week.
Agree. And we felt the same way earlier in the year. They were underdogs to Wisconsin, right?
Yes.
And then underdogs to, was it Oregon State?
Yes. They've won straight outright as an underdog twice. So why not make it a third?
Let's make it a third. All right. My 2-pointer is Iowa minus 2.5 against Purdue. They're at home. Cade McNamara obviously is out. Is he out for the year? He's out.
He is. There might be 2.5 people watch that game. One
so
of them's our editor.
That's tough. Our boss is at the game, so he'll definitely be paying attention. But Iowa. I think again the ask is to win the game, and defensively, Purdue hasn't been great this year. They had a win last week, but I feel like Iowa's going to have enough to figure out how to win the game, and they. 2.5 is not much to ask. Defense is so good. They always make plays on special teams, and it's going to be low scoring. I know that, but I think they can win. And then 2.5, all you have to do is win the game, basically. So I'm taking Iowa.
Yep. And 1, I'm taking Texas. Same. I mean, 6.5, like the same reasons. I think the Longhorns cover. Always risky though. I thought about putting Miami here in the 17.5 because I like that line a lot too, but I'm going to go with Texas 6.5.
Interesting. So we got 3 picks that are the same.
There ain't going to be much movement in the standings at that point. So
I know. I'm playing defense. I'm boxing you out. My 1-pointer, Maryland plus 19.5 at Ohio State. You talked about it a little bit. Big line.
Huge line.
They've obviously played well. They covered a 25-point line last year with a 13-point loss against a better Ohio State team. I think Ohio State is not as good as they were last year. I think Maryland is better than they were last year. And like I said, it was a 43-30 game. So my hope is
that'll be fun.
Yeah, Maryland can at least keep it within 19.5, even though it's on the road.
Right.
So, all right. Well, before we get out of here, Trocchi Trivia, Bill Bender, who are the top 2 rated passers in the ACC?
Well, I think you tipped the hand a little bit. I know Van Dyke's one of them because I've kind of tracked him throughout the year as one of like the underrated quarterbacks in the country with what Miami's doing. I played around a lot with the Georgia Tech line this week because I was like, half of me thinks Georgia Tech will have a rise up moment after an embarrassing loss. The other half looks at Miami, how they're trending. They're really good on defense. They're really good on offense. We're probably not talking about them enough. So I know Van Dyke's one, and I think Plummer's the other one because it just makes sense. Because I know Drake May has the picks, and I know Jordan Travis is probably close, and this is a trick question. So I'll say Plummer and Van Dyke would be my answer.
Well done. Well
Yep.
done. You
Back
nailed
on
it.
track.
You
Bronc-
nailed it. You are back on track, and it's interesting that actually the third quarterback in the league is Haynes King from Georgia Tech.
Yeah, and
Somehow,
Riley
some way, he's the third rated passer. So.
Leonard doesn't throw enough, I don't think, or he's probably close. But yeah, I mean, Plummer, it's a Jeff Brom quarterback, so it's like it's kind of an easy. Whoever his quarterback is going to be up there.
Right. So, all right. Well, that will do it for our show. We will be back Saturday night for our live show on the CFB Nation YouTube channel. You can join us for that chat on Saturday night. Thank you to everyone for listening today to the CFB Nation All-America podcast, brought to you by Twisted Tea on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Write a review if you can. Thank you to Irish Breakdown, your source for Notre Dame football information. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you Saturday night.